Chapter 1. The Day the Sky Burned. The morning began like any other on New Horizon. Sunlight spilled across the colony's glass-domed districts, turning the streets gold. Cargo shuttles drifted toward the orbital docks overhead, their engines leaving faint silver trails across the blue sky. Farmers were already tending hydroponic fields beyond the city limits, while commuters filled the transit lines leading toward factories, schools, and administrative centers. For 12-year-old Lena Ortiz, it was just another school day. She sat near the window of classroom 4B, half listening to her history lesson, while watching construction drones assemble a new residential tower in the distance. Humanity didn't become respected because it conquered worlds, her mother often said. Today, her teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, seemed determined to make the same point. "Who can tell me why humans are called the builders?" she asked. Several hands shot up. Lena raised hers. "Because we help colonies recover after disasters." "Correct," Mrs. Alvarez replied with a smile. "Anyone else?" A boy near the front spoke next. "Because we build more than we destroy." The teacher nodded approvingly. Outside, life continued peacefully. Inside, nobody knew that a fleet had just entered the system. Thousands of kilometers above the planet, warning alarms echoed through New Horizons' orbital control station. Operators stared at their displays in disbelief. Unidentified vessels exiting hyperspace. "How many?" The technician swallowed. 32 confirmed. More still arriving. Silence spread across the command center. The symbols on the screens were unmistakable. Varel Dominion. Within minutes, emergency communications reached Governor Mira Chun. The transmission appeared before her desk. A towering reptilian figure stared back. His armored scales gleamed beneath harsh command deck lighting. "Governor Chun," he said, "you have ignored Dominion trade directives for the final time." Chun remained calm. "Your demands were extortion. They were obligations. We recognize neither your authority nor your claims." The Varel commander tilted his head slightly. "Then responsibility for what follows belongs to you." The transmission ended. Across the colony, emergency sirens suddenly erupted. The sound froze conversations, stopped traffic, and sent thousands of citizens looking toward the sky. Inside the school, students exchanged nervous glances. Mrs. Alvarez immediately stood. "Everyone stay calm." The practiced confidence in her voice settled the room. "Proceed to evacuation routes." "No running." The children rose from their desks. Lena felt her stomach tighten. Emergency drills were common near frontier space. Real attacks were not. They entered the hallway as red warning lights flashed overhead. Teachers guided students toward underground shelters built beneath the school complex. Then the first impact struck. The floor trembled violently. A distant boom rolled through the structure. Several children screamed. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Mrs. Alvarez moved quickly. "Keep moving." Another explosion followed, much closer. This time windows shattered throughout the corridor. The shockwave knocked students against the walls. Lena struggled to stay upright. "What's happening?" someone cried. Nobody answered. Outside, orbital weapons rained destruction across the colony. A hospital vanished beneath a column of fire. Residential blocks collapsed. Transportation hubs erupted into flames. The attack wasn't aimed at military targets. It was aimed at the city itself. Deep within the Varel flagship, officers watched tactical displays. One younger commander frowned. "Sir, our targeting solutions include schools and medical centers." The bridge fell silent. The fleet commander never looked away from the screen. "Confirmed. Those aren't military facilities. They are symbols." The younger officer hesitated, then wisely said nothing. Back on the surface, panic spread faster than the bombardment. Families rushed toward shelters. Emergency responders raced toward impact zones already overflowing with casualties. At the school, students finally reached the underground access corridor. Relief began to spread. Then another strike landed. The explosion hit somewhere above them. Metal screamed. Concrete cracked. The lights died instantly. Darkness swallowed everything. For a terrifying moment, nobody moved. Then emergency illumination flickered on. Red, dim, unsteady. Mrs. Alvarez quickly counted heads. Everyone stayed together. Lena noticed fear in her teacher's eyes for the first time. Not panic, fear. That frightened her more than the explosions. The bombardment continued for nearly an hour. When the attacks finally stopped, silence felt unnatural. Rescue teams worked through mountains of debris. Medical shuttles filled every available landing zone. Smoke drifted across the city in thick black clouds. Hours later, survivors emerged from the maintenance tunnel connected to the shelter network. Lena stepped outside and stopped. The school was gone. One entire section had collapsed inward. Emergency lights flashed through the smoke. Rescuers carried stretchers across shattered pavement. Some were covered. She recognized a backpack lying beside a pile of rubble. It belonged to a classmate. Nearby, exhausted workers carefully lifted another small form from the wreckage. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. Lena stared at the destruction stretching across the horizon. Burning buildings, collapsed shelters, broken streets. The colony she had known that morning no longer existed. As sirens echoed to the ruined city, a terrible realization settled into her mind. The Varel had not come for soldiers. They had come for children. Chapter 2. Humanity Mourns. The images reached Earth less than 3 hours after the attack. At first, people refused to believe them. News feeds showed shattered neighborhoods, burning hospitals, and rescue workers digging through collapsed shelters with bare hands. Parents searched casualty lists. Emergency broadcasts replaced entertainment channels. Across human space, daily life slowed as the scale of the tragedy became impossible to ignore. New Horizon had not been a military fortress. It had been a home. By the end of the day, every human world knew its name. On Earth, crowds gathered in silence beneath the memorial spire in Geneva. On Mars, factory workers stopped production for 1 minute. Orbital stations dimmed their exterior lights. Candles appeared in windows from Luna to Titan. No government ordered it. People simply understood. Meanwhile, thousands of light years away, rescue operations continued. Lena Ortiz sat inside a temporary medical shelter erected near the ruins of her school. Her clothes were still stained with dust. Around her, survivors waited for updates about missing family members. Volunteers moved from table to table carrying datapads. Every conversation ended one of 2 ways: relief or heartbreak. Lena watched a woman collapse after reading a casualty report. Nobody looked away. Everyone knew that pain could be theirs next. Hours later, a transport shuttle finally landed from orbit. Workers, engineers, and station personnel poured onto the landing field. Among them was her father. Miguel Ortiz spotted her immediately. "Lena!" She ran toward him. The moment they embraced, weeks of fear seemed to leave him all at once. He held her tightly. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Lena whispered the question haunting every survivor. "Did they find Mom?" Miguel's expression answered before words could. His eyes lowered. The silence lasted too long. Lena already knew. The world felt smaller afterward. Not louder, not dramatic, just emptier. Far from New Horizon, Admiral Elias Ward received the casualty reports aboard the carrier HNS Resolute. The files arrived continuously. Updated numbers, confirmed deaths, infrastructure losses, witness testimony. Ward had spent decades in military service. He had seen battlefields, pirate raids, and border conflicts. Nothing in his career prepared him for the targeting data now displayed across his desk. Schools, shelters, medical facilities. Every strike had been deliberate. Commander Amina Sato stood nearby. Neither spoke while the report loaded. Finally, she broke the silence. Satellite records confirmed weapon locks before impact. Ward continued reading. There was no tactical reason. "No, sir." His jaw tightened slightly. That was the only visible reaction. Yet everyone on the bridge noticed it, because Elias Ward almost never showed emotion. Hours later, representatives from dozens of species gathered inside the Galactic Concord Assembly. The chamber resembled an enormous amphitheater suspended beneath a transparent dome overlooking the stars. Human diplomats arrived carrying evidence. No speeches, no political theatrics, only facts. Governor Mira Chin appeared first, then rescue coordinators, then medical personnel. Finally, Dr. Nathan Hale took the stand. The physician looked exhausted. His uniform still bore marks from emergency operations. The chamber quieted as he spoke. I spent 17 hours treating victims. Images appeared behind him. Destroyed clinics, collapsed shelters, children's belongings recovered from rubble. Several delegates looked away. Hale did not. We received wounded civilians faster than we could stabilize them. We lost patients because operating rooms no longer existed. A murmur spread through the audience. Then the Varel delegation requested speaking privileges. The central display activated. Overlord Karvek Thull appeared, massive, armored, unapologetic. His yellow eyes surveyed the chamber without concern. The Dominion acted within its rights. Outrage erupted immediately. Karvek waited until the noise subsided. Defiance invites consequences. A delegate from another species rose. You attack non-combatants. We attack symbols of resistance. The distinction horrified the room. Dr. Hale stepped forward. His voice remained steady. I treated children. Karvek's expression never changed. Then your colony should have surrendered sooner. The silence afterward felt heavier than any argument. For many delegates, that moment settled the issue. The Dominion wasn't denying responsibility. It was celebrating it. Back aboard the Resolute, Ward watched the proceedings unfold live. When the transmission ended, Sato folded her arms. The Concorde won't act fast enough. Ward knew she was right. Committees would debate. Investigations would begin. Resolutions would circulate. Meanwhile, the people responsible remained free. A notification appeared on his terminal. Priority level, highest. He opened it. Authorization from a human assembly. Military readiness status elevated. Fleet reserves activated. Strategic shipyards transitioning to wartime production. Ward stared at the message for several seconds. Humanity had spent generations avoiding large-scale conflict. That era was ending. Outside the carrier's observation deck, maintenance crews worked around the clock. Supply vessels arrived every hour. Dockyards previously dedicated to civilian logistics were already changing purpose. The machine of war was beginning to move. On New Horizon, night settled over the damaged colony. Lena placed a small photograph beside a memorial candle. It showed her mother smiling during a school festival the previous year. Hundreds of lights surrounded it. Each represented someone who would never return. Above the colony, stars emerged through drifting smoke. For the first time since the attack, Lena noticed something different. People were still grieving, still afraid. But beneath the sorrow, another feeling was growing. Resolve. Someone had done this. Someone had chosen it. And sooner or later, they would answer for it. Across human space, billions reached the same conclusion. Chapter 3, Awakening the Giant. 3 weeks after the destruction of New Horizon, the galaxy began noticing something unsettling. Humanity had gone quiet. Not politically, not diplomatically. Industrially, shipyards that once announced every civilian launch stopped broadcasting schedules. Freight routes changed without explanation. Defense contractors received contracts so large that production centers operated around the clock. From the outside, it looked like preparation. From the inside, it was mobilization. Admiral Elias Ward stood before a holographic star map aboard the HNS Resolute. Hundreds of glowing markers filled the display. Fleet groups, supply convoys, strategic reserves, assets the galaxy had never seen. Commander Amina Sato studied the projections. Our analysts estimate the Dominion expects a retaliatory strike within 2 months. Ward folded his hands behind his back. They're wrong. Sato glanced at him. We're moving sooner. We're moving smarter. The map shifted. Red icons representing Varel military infrastructure appeared across multiple sectors. Fuel depots, weapons factories, fleet staging areas. Ward pointed toward them one by one. No civilian targets. Understood. No population centers. Sato nodded. Military assets only. The order spread through every command channel. Humanity was preparing for war, but not the kind Karvek expected. across Dominion territory. Officials celebrated a lack of immediate retaliation. The overlord himself appeared increasingly confident. Inside the capital's war chamber, senior commanders gathered around a tactical display. One governor spoke carefully. Human fleet movements are increasing along the frontier. Carvec dismissed a concern. Predictable. Reports suggest unusual ship production. The overlord's tail struck the floor. Good. The room fell silent. Carvec smiled. Fear is working. Nobody challenged him. Nobody wanted to. Meanwhile, humanity's first move was already underway. The Kepri Gate served as one of the Dominion's most important hyperspace corridors. Every major fleet operating along the frontier relied upon it. Destroying the station would cripple logistics. Unfortunately, nearly 50,000 civilians lived there. Ward refused to sacrifice them. Hours before the operation began, encrypted broadcasts flooded the station. Evacuation instructions, safe routes, departure schedules. The messages repeated in 6 languages. Some residents ignored them. Others immediately fled. Dominion commanders dismissed the warnings as psychological warfare. They would soon regret that decision. The battle began at dawn station time. Human stealth frigates emerged first. Hidden within sensor shadows, they disabled communication relays and targeting arrays before defenders realized an attack had started. Then the main fleet arrived. Hundreds of warships exited hyperspace in perfect formation. The Dominion responded instantly. Missiles streaked across space. Railgun rounds crossed millions of kilometers. Fighters launched from carrier bays. For observers, the battlefield resembled a storm made of fire. Inside the Resolute, officers monitored every engagement. Enemy destroyer disabled. Evacuation corridor remains open. Civilian transports clearing Sector 7. Ward listened without speaking. His focus remained on the evacuation status. A tactical officer looked surprised. Sir, most commanders would prioritize battle reports. Ward never looked away from the display. People first. The officer understood immediately. Hours later, the station surrendered. Civilian casualties remained remarkably low. Military losses were extensive. The contrast spread rapidly across galactic media. Human forces had captured a strategic objective while protecting the very people caught between both sides. The Dominion would not have done the same. News of the victory reached countless worlds. Among the viewers was Lena Ortiz. She now lived aboard a refugee habitat orbiting New Horizon. The station felt crowded but alive. Families shared meals. Children attended temporary classrooms. Volunteers worked tirelessly. One afternoon, Lena helped distribute educational tablets to younger survivors. A little boy accepted one nervously. Will we ever go home? She hesitated. Weeks ago, she wouldn't have known how to answer. Now she did. Yeah. The boy looked uncertain. How do you know? Lena thought of the reconstruction crews already rebuilding sections of the colony, of rescue workers who never stopped searching, of strangers sending supplies from worlds she'd never heard of, because humans don't quit. Elsewhere, problems inside the Dominion were growing. Supply shortages spread across frontier sectors. Trade routes collapsed. Several subordinate species openly resisted Varel authority. For decades they had feared the Empire. Now they saw something unexpected. The Empire could bleed. Governors demanded reinforcements. Commanders requested resources. Carvec ignored most of them. He remained convinced victory was inevitable. Then another report arrived. Another shipyard destroyed. Another fleet defeated. Another world liberated. His confidence finally began to crack. Inside his private chamber, an advisor approached carefully. Overlord, perhaps negotiations should be considered. Carvec's eyes narrowed. You sound afraid. I sound realistic. The response nearly cost him his life. Only years of service prevented immediate execution. After the advisor departed, Carvec stared at the latest casualty figures. For the first time, doubt entered his thoughts. Not because humanity was stronger, because humanity was different. Every strategic assumption he had relied upon was failing. Weeks later, the largest fleet ever assembled by human space crossed the Dominion border. Thousands of vessels emerged from hyperspace together. The sight stunned observers throughout the region. Defense stations activated emergency alarms. Governors issued evacuation orders. Military commands demanded instructions. On the bridge of the Resolute, silence filled the room as the enormous armada advanced. Ward studied the stars ahead. The war had entered its final phase. Behind him stood humanity's strength. Before him stood the architects of New Horizons' tragedy. Neither side could turn back now. The road led only forward, toward judgment. Chapter 4, Judgment. The Varel capital system had never known fear. For generations, Vorex Prime stood at the center of an empire that stretched across hundreds of worlds. Its rulers dictated terms, issued demands, and crushed opposition wherever it appeared. The possibility of defeat belonged to other civilizations. Not anymore. Warning sirens echoed across orbital stations as thousands of human vessels emerged from hyperspace. The sight was staggering. Carriers, battleships, cruisers, support fleets. A wall of steel stretching farther than sensors could easily measure. Citizens crowded public screens. Military personnel rushed between command centers. Emergency broadcasts interrupted every communication channel. The war had arrived at their doorstep. Inside the Dominion Palace, Overlord Karvek Thol stared at the tactical display. Red symbols filled the system map. Every minute, more appeared. An officer approached carefully. Outer defensive grid has fallen. Karvek remained silent. Minutes later, another report arrived. Orbital shipyards have surrendered. Then another. Fleet Group 7 is retreating. The room grew tense. Nobody dared acknowledge the obvious. The Empire was collapsing. Meanwhile, aboard the HMS Resolute, Admiral Elias Ward prepared for the final operation. Unlike the attack on New Horizon, this battle will begin with a warning. His image appeared across every Dominion communication network. Factories stopped. Traffic halted. Entire cities watched. Ward's voice remained calm. To the citizens of the Dominion, human forces are targeting military infrastructure and those responsible for crimes against civilians. The transmission continued. Evacuation corridors have been established. Follow emergency guidance and move toward designated safe zones. Officers around him exchanged brief glances. The enemy had shown no mercy, yet humanity was offering it. Ward concluded with a simple statement. No child should suffer because of decisions made by leaders. The broadcast ended. Across Vorex Prime, civilians flooded evacuation routes. Human ships protected those corridors throughout the assault. Any Dominion vessel attempting to use refugees as shields was intercepted immediately. Within hours, orbital defenses ceased functioning. Human Marines began landing near strategic command facilities. Resistance remained fierce but increasingly disorganized. The campaign was ending. Karvek refused to accept it. Deep inside the palace fortress, he gathered his remaining commanders. We still possess ground forces. One officer shook his head. Not enough. We have reserves. They surrendered yesterday. The answer triggered a furious response. Karvek slammed his claw against the table. Cowards. No one replied. Many had spent months watching humanity conduct military operations while avoiding unnecessary destruction. The contrast between both sides had become impossible to ignore. One commander finally spoke. The people blame us. Karvek stared at him. They should fear us. They did. The officer's voice remained steady. That was a problem. For a moment, nobody moved. Then security alarms suddenly activated throughout the palace. Human forces had breached the outer defenses. The final confrontation had begun. Minutes later, armored doors exploded inward. Smoke rolled through the chamber. Human Marines entered first. Admiral Ward followed. The room fell silent. For months, both men had shaped the course of the war from opposite sides of the galaxy. Now they stood face to face. Karvek rose from his throne. So this is what your justice looks like. Ward stepped forward. No, this is accountability. The Overlord laughed bitterly. You crossed half the galaxy for revenge. Ward's expression never changed. If revenge was our goal, your cities would already be ash. The statement carried weight because everyone present knew it was true. Human fleets possessed overwhelming firepower. They simply chose not to use it against civilians. Karvek's eyes narrowed. You call restraint strength? Ward answered immediately. Strength is having power and deciding where not to use it. Silence followed. The word struck harder than any threat. For the first time, uncertainty appeared on the Overlord's face. His empire had always measured power through fear. Humanity measured it differently. Desperate, Karvek activated a concealed command console. Emergency alerts flashed across the chamber. A self-destruct sequence. Several fusion reactors beneath the capital district began charging. Millions could die. Even now, he intended to sacrifice his own people. Before he could finish the command, one of his senior officers drew a sidearm. The shot struck the console. Sparks erupted. The countdown vanished. Karvek stared at the officer in disbelief. You betray me? The commander lowered his weapon. No. His voice trembled. I finally stopped following you. Security teams immediately restrained the Overlord. The war was over. Months later, New Horizon looked different. Construction drones filled the skies. New buildings stood where ruins once remained. Parks replaced debris fields. Schools reopened. Life had returned. Lena Ortiz walked through the entrance of a newly rebuilt academy, carrying a tablet under one arm. Her father waited nearby. Children laughed across the courtyard. The sound felt unfamiliar at first, then comforting. Near the entrance stood a memorial honoring those lost during the attack. Among the names was her mother's. Lena touched the inscription briefly before heading inside. Classes were beginning. The future was waiting. Far above the colony, sunlight reflected from orbiting stations as reconstruction continued. Humanity had won the war, not by becoming monsters, not by abandoning its principles, but by proving that compassion and strength were never opposites. Across countless worlds, that lesson would not be forgotten.